Noah didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, on that polished white marble showroom floor, framed by a glimmering halo of chrome and glass, his gaze locked on the luxury car manager, like he was watching something ancient stir beneath a modern mask. That moment, barely 15 seconds long, has haunted me ever since, because what happened in that dealership on the corner of Ashwood and Main wasn't just another case of profiling or prejudice or one of those incidents people talk about over coffee but forget by dinner. No, this was something else. Something that made me question if we ever really know who walks among us. He didn't dress the part. That's what threw them off. Black hoodie, faded jeans, clean but not designer, and shoes that had seen some treatment, but his eyes, God, his eyes told a story none of us were ready to read. When he stepped through the showroom doors, the atmosphere changed. It was so subtle that if you blinked, you'd miss it. The kind of shift in energy that makes the hairs on the back of your neck rise before your brain catches up. The front desk girl glanced up, froze for half a beat, then quickly busied herself with her keyboard. Customers hushed their conversations. And the manager, Franklin, his smile flickered like a dying light bulb. He looked at Noah like he didn't belong, like he was some glitch in a world that ran on image and assumption. Franklin didn't ask if he needed help. He didn't smile. He didn't even greet him. He just stepped forward with that clipped confidence you only see in men who believe they'll never be questioned. "Sir, we're a by-appointment-only showroom," he said, voice too smooth, too practiced. And Noah, still silent, glanced at the cherry-red Porsche on the turntable, then at the manager. Then said something that none of us heard. But I felt. It was like the sound vibrated straight through the floor and up my spine. Franklin took one step back. His face paled, not like he was embarrassed, but like something colder had gripped him. Like he saw something behind Noah that no one else could. That's when things got weird. The lights dimmed, just a flicker. The dealership speakers playing soft jazz cut out for a second and hissed. The scent of new leather and wax polish was suddenly overpowered by something metallic, like blood in your mouth after biting your tongue. And just like that, Franklin turned, snapped his fingers, and demanded Noah leave the building immediately. Noah didn't argue. He smiled. A knowing, slow smile that reached nowhere near his eyes. Then he walked out. No fuss, no fight. Just vanished into the sunlight like smoke into wind. But here's where everything breaks. Exactly 3 minutes after Noah stepped outside, the glass doors opened again, and a woman walked in. No one recognized her, but everyone felt her. She was dressed in a sharply tailored suit that somehow seemed too perfect for this world. Gray like storm clouds over the ocean, heels that echoed like thunder with every step, skin like polished bronze, hair pulled back in a perfect coil, eyes like winter steel. She didn't look at anyone, except Franklin. Her eyes sliced through the room, past customers and staff, and zeroed in on him like a missile locked on heat. Franklin stumbled back, knocking over a podium. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He reached for his phone, but it slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. Then she spoke. Only one sentence, just 5 words. But when she did, the air changed again. "Where is the boy?" "Franklin?" The room went dead silent. Someone dropped their coffee. The baby in the corner stroller began crying, hard, like it sensed something we couldn't see. But I could swear, just for a moment, from the cracked screen of Franklin's fallen phone, a voice whispered. It was a man's voice, faint, gravelly, and it said her name. A name no one in that building ever said aloud, a name that had been buried for 16 years. And that's when I knew we weren't just dealing with a mistake. We were dealing with a secret that was never meant to be uncovered, but it already was. And whatever happens next, it's too late to stop it. The shattered phone lay on the marble floor like a broken promise, its cracked screen barely flickering. Franklin's face was ashen, eyes wide and unblinking, like he was caught between 2 worlds. The woman's voice echoed in my ears long after the showroom returned to its usual hum, a sentence so simple, so loaded with unspoken weight. "Where is the boy, Franklin?" And then, silence. But was it really silence, or just a pause? A breath held too long, beneath the surface of something vast and unknowable? Because what came next unraveled everything I thought I saw. The room, the whole dealership, started to blur, edges softening as if I were watching through a cracked lens. The light changed again, not just dimming but warping, bending in on. Itself like reality was folding inward. The baby's cries slowed, then stopped, replaced by an almost imperceptible buzzing, like the faintest static from a radio tuned to a station that didn't exist. For a moment I blinked, and in that brief fraction of time the woman vanished, just gone. No footsteps, no door swinging shut, no trace. Like she'd been a ghost conjured from the air. Only Franklin was left, trembling against the marble wall. Hands shaking, whispering a name I didn't catch. But then he looked up at me. His eyes weren't the eyes of a man breaking under pressure. They were the eyes of someone terrified of forgetting. That's when the doubts began. Was any of this real? Or had I stepped into a place where memory and madness were tangled so tightly they fed on each other? I replayed the scene over and over in my head, but every time details shifted. The baby's cries sometimes faded to silence, sometimes morphed into a voice repeating that woman's name, an echo only I seemed to hear. Franklin's words slipped through my mind like smoke, half-formed and impossible to grasp. And worst of all, I realized I couldn't remember how I got there in the first place. The drive, the street signs, even the name of the dealership blurred into a fog. It wasn't just me. Later, when I tried to tell others, their faces would twitch with confusion or irritation, as if I were speaking a language they refused to understand. Or worse, a language they had been told to forget. That's when I found Alex. He was the kind of guy who had been around the block too many times but still smelled like trouble. Messy hair, eyes darting like a cornered animal, voice gravelly with too many late nights and too little sleep. I met him at a dimly lit bar a few days after that night, desperate for someone to validate what I'd seen. But Alex wasn't just unreliable, he was a living question mark. "I know what you're chasing," he said, lighting a cigarette with shaky hands. "But the truth behind what no one tells you is that some doors are meant to stay shut." He spoke like he was warning me, but there was desperation behind it, like he was warning himself just as much. "You want to know about the boy, about the woman, about what they don't want you to remember. It's all tangled with things you're not ready for." When I pressed him, he only smiled, a thin, bitter smile, and handed me a small, grainy recording on a USB stick. "Play this when you're alone. Just don't say I didn't warn you." Back in my apartment, I plugged the stick into my laptop. The audio crackled to life, a chorus of voices layered beneath one another. Franklin's voice was there, yes, but so were others. Snatches of conversations, whispered names, half-memories tangled with static. And then, unmistakably, that woman's voice but distorted, warped, almost inhuman. The last thing I heard before the recording cut out was a single phrase repeated like a mantra. "He remembers nothing." And that's when the wall started to close in. My dreams twisted into nightmares where the dealership morphed into a labyrinth with no exit, the woman's silhouette flickering in every shadow. I found myself questioning what was real, the flashes of memory, the persistent buzzing in my ears, the moments I caught myself staring blankly at nothing, as if waiting for a message only I could receive. Was I losing my mind? Or was I becoming part of something far older and darker than any of us wanted to admit? One night, just before sleep claimed me, my phone rang. No number, no caller ID, just a voice, calm, chilling, familiar. "Do you remember the boy, Noah?" it asked. No name, no explanation, just that single loaded question. I wanted to scream, but the voice kept going, soft but relentless, dragging me deeper into the labyrinth of shadows and silence. And the last thing it said before the line went dead was a warning I can't shake. Some memories are kept safe by forgetting. Don't know who's watching or if I'm still watching at all, but I do know this. Whatever you think you know about that night, about Franklin, the woman, and the boy, it's only the beginning. The real unsolved mystery is what lies beneath the surface, the truth behind what no one tells you, hidden in the places they don't want you to remember. And I'm still trying to find the door. The night I thought I had finally cracked it open, the hidden truth revealed, the pieces clicking into place with a sickening clarity, is burned into my memory like a scar I never asked for but can't erase. It started with a call, one of those late-night half-remembered moments when your mind lurches awake in the dark and everything feels off-kilter, like the world is a little too heavy on one side. I sat there, the phone buzzing against the wooden. Dismissal, the receiver cold in my hand. The voice on the other end was rough, low, almost mechanical but unmistakably human. "You're closer than you think," it said, "but the real answer hides in what you forgot." And for once I listened. The next morning I found myself back at the dealership, the site of the unraveling nightmare. Only this time the place was empty. No shining cars, no polished floors, no manager with eyes like a trapped animal. The whole building felt abandoned, shuttered tight against the world, as if it had been waiting for me to come back and confront the shadows lurking beneath its surface. And maybe it had. I started digging, not with cameras or phone calls or desperate whispers in dark bars, but with cold, hard facts, old records, local archives, faded newspaper clippings from years ago. I learned about a child, who vanished from a luxury car showroom on Ashwood Street nearly 2 decades before, in a case no one ever talked about. His name was Elijah Turner. The details were scarce, but what was there twisted the knife deeper. The child had disappeared on the same showroom floor where Noah had been kicked out. The same polished marble, the same glinting chrome, the same impossibly sharp eyes of a woman no one could place. Except this wasn't some random coincidence. It was a haunting mirror, a dark echo from the past bleeding into the present. I could almost feel Elijah's absence in the air, like a stain beneath the surface of everyday life, growing heavier with each breath. The more I read, the more the lines between then and now blurred. Franklin, the manager, was a name whispered in hushed tones in those old police reports. He'd been at the center of the original investigation, accused, but never charged. There were rumors of breakdowns, disappearances, and late-night visits from people who weren't supposed to exist. For a brief moment, it all made sense. The strange woman, the whispered name, the vanishing boy. This was a wound that had never healed, reopened and bleeding again for reasons I couldn't yet grasp. I went back to the dealership that night, armed with this new knowledge, convinced I was about to unearth the final piece of a puzzle long buried. The air was thick with cold, and the building groaned under the weight of its secrets. I followed a thread, a scent of old leather and something far darker, like fear itself pressed into the walls. And then I found it, a hidden room, concealed behind a false wall in the back office, thick with dust and silence. Inside, old recordings, and papers littered a desk. Tape reels labeled with dates and names, including Elijah Turner's, sat beside a faded photograph of the woman, the one who had appeared that night, her eyes haunting and unreadable. I pressed play on one of the tapes. The voices that spilled out were chilling. Franklin's voice layered with panic, pleading over and over for forgiveness. The woman's voice followed, calm and cold, speaking in riddles about memory glitches, about how some truths were too dangerous to hold on to. And then, a chilling confession from Franklin that shattered my last grip on certainty. They told me to keep the boy safe, but I never knew who I was keeping him from. And that's when the tape hissed and crackled, distorting the voices, into something monstrous, something no human should hear. A low, guttural sound slithered beneath the words, like a breath from the void itself. I stopped the tape, heart pounding in the cold silence. But here's the detail that unraveled everything. On the back of the photograph, in a trembling hand, was a date that wasn't Elijah's disappearance. It was mine. I flipped the picture again, eyes wide. The woman's gaze seemed to pierce through me, My pulse thudded like a warning drum. The memory glitches, the unplaceable fear, the voices in the dark. They weren't just fragments of someone else's nightmare. They were pieces of mine. The more I tried to separate myself from this horror, the more it clung to me like a second skin. The past wasn't behind me. It was inside me. And that's when the feeling settled, like something had been watching. All along, waiting, patient and cold. It wasn't just in the showroom or in the shadows of forgotten files. It was here, in my mind, in the quiet moments between waking and sleep, whispering truths that felt like lies and lies that felt like survival. It didn't have a name. It didn't need one. Because it was personal. It was the thing lurking just beyond the edges of memory, the thing that made you question if you were losing your mind, or if reality had been rewritten while you weren't looking. The real unsolved mystery was no longer about a vanished boy or a vanished woman. It was about what we carry inside, the dark, the forgotten, the pieces of ourselves that no one ever wants to remember. As I sat there in the darkness, the recording still echoing in my ears, a final thought crawled up from the depths of my mind. One that chilled me to my core. What if everything you thought you saw wasn't just a story about others? What if you've been living it all along? And suddenly, I realized, the entire story, every moment, every detail up to this point, needed to be watched again. Because the truth wasn't just hidden. It was waiting to rewrite everything you thought you knew. There's a weight in knowing you're not alone in a nightmare, especially when those others are shadows themselves, lurking just beyond the edges of perception, watching the story unfold like it's some twisted game. I didn't realize it at first. The fragmented voices in the tapes, the distorted faces in the photos, the way the woman's eyes seemed to follow me everywhere I went. It wasn't just me haunted by these memories or half-remembered horrors. There were others, silent witnesses bound by a thread of something ancient, something that neither time nor reason could unravel. It started subtly. Messages, almost too faint to notice, slipped into my life like ghostly fingerprints. At first, they were scribbles in margins of forgotten books I pulled from dusty shelves, symbols I'd never seen before, looping lines that twisted into shapes that felt both alien and deeply familiar. Then came the dreams. Shared dreams, because I know now I wasn't alone in those restless nights where reality fractured and bled into something darker. In these dreams, faceless figures stood at the edges of shadowed rooms, hands outstretched, but never touching, mouths moving silently as if whispering secrets only my mind could hear. And the strangest part? Sometimes I'd wake to find marks on my skin, faint, almost invisible patterns matching those symbols from the margins. I found others like me in quiet corners of the internet, forums wrapped in code, chat rooms where people spoke in half-lies and half-truths, trading fragments of what they called found footage from 20 years ago, or what the government never released. We exchanged warnings disguised as riddles, and the more I read, the deeper the dread grew. They had seen what I'd seen, felt what I'd felt. And just like me, they lived in that disorienting twilight between knowing and forgetting. You were. Right all along they'd tell each other, words that echoed like a lifeline and a curse. But who were these others? Were they victims, observers, or something else entirely? The answer was never clear. Faces blurred, names vanished, replaced by usernames that felt like incantations. Watchern 37, Silent Echo, The Fifth Signal. The more I tried to pull them into the light, the more they slipped away, like sand through clenched fists. It was as if we were all pieces of a puzzle no one wanted completed, trapped in a labyrinth where every turn revealed a new question instead of an exit. Then, just when I thought the fog couldn't thicken any further, a third voice entered the scene. Not in whispers or glitches, but stark, raw, and impossible to ignore. I stumbled across a file, a recording hidden deep in one of those encrypted archives titled simply, Observer. The voice on the tape was calm, deliberate, but beneath the steady tone, there was an urgency, a brittle edge that set every nerve on fire. The speaker claimed to be watching everything. Us, the haunted, the lost, the ones caught in the web of memory and control. They called themselves something I still can't fully understand. But the message was clear. I am the one telling the truth you've been too afraid to hear. This observer didn't just narrate. They challenged reality itself, exposing cracks in our identities, memories we thought were ours, but that might have been planted or erased. What if your memories aren't yours? The voice asked. What if the stories you cling to are echoes of a narrative scripted by forces beyond your comprehension? They spoke of a presence, neither living nor dead, that had been watching since before we even knew to look, shaping what we remembered, controlling what we forgot, bending our very sense of self. The tape ended with a warning, a cryptic invitation, to look closer, to question everything, even this message. Because the observer was not just outside the story, but woven into its darkest corners, a guardian of a truth so dangerous it had been buried beneath decades of silence and lies. Now, every glance in the mirror feels like a challenge. Every forgotten omen a door to something darker. The symbols, the messages, the dreams, they're not just coincidences. They're a map, a code for those who dare to see beyond the veil. But to what end? And who's truly pulling the strings? This isn't just a story about a missing boy, a haunted dealership, or fragmented memories. It's a vast, unfolding conspiracy, woven into the fabric of reality itself, waiting for the right moment to unravel everything. And as you watch this, reading between the lines, know this: you've been part of it all along. The question isn't whether you're crazy or not. They lied to you from the start. The real question is how deep you're willing to go before you lose the thread entirely, because the watcher is always watching. And the story? It's far from prejudice. There's a moment in every unraveling when the question shifts from what happened to why it happened, when the cold facts and shattered memories fold into something raw, something that reaches beneath the skin and unsettles the very core of who you thought you were. I found myself standing on that precipice, staring into a void not filled with answers, but with the terrifying possibility that the truth could either destroy me or somehow, in its own merciless way, save me. It wasn't about Elijah Turner anymore. It wasn't about Franklin or the woman with the impossible eyes. It was about something far more intimate, a fracture in the fragile mirror of humanity itself. I remember the night it broke me open, or maybe it was the night I broke myself. The silence in my apartment was suffocating, the walls closing in like the weight of every secret I'd ever buried. I sat with the tapes, the symbols, the messages, each a shard of a puzzle I couldn't yet see whole. And then, in the flickering glow of a single lamp, I heard my own voice on an old recording, a voice I didn't recognize layered beneath the noise like a ghost trapped between time and memory. It was me confessing something I hadn't dared speak aloud, a confession of fear, of loss, and of a part of myself I had tried to forget. A moment when I had stood in that same dealership years ago, paralyzed by something I now understood was more than just fear. It was surrender. What if this wasn't some external conspiracy? What if the force pulling the strings, distorting memories, twisting reality, was a reflection of ourselves, our deepest wounds, our darkest fears, our desperate, "You need to control a world that slips farther away with every heartbeat"? The observer's words echoed in my mind. What if your memories aren't yours? But the answer wasn't just about planted memories or manipulated truths. It was about the human condition, the struggle to hold on to identity when everything around you demands you lose it. I realized then that the haunting wasn't some curse or secret experiment. It was a mirror held up to humanity's most vulnerable place, our relentless, aching search for meaning in chaos, our tendency to rewrite our stories to protect ourselves from truths too painful to bear. The disappearance, the whispers, the vanishing figures, they were symptoms of something universal. The fear that if we truly saw ourselves, unfiltered and unguarded, we might cease to exist at all. And that's where the choice lay. To keep running from the fractured pieces of myself, or to embrace the terrifying awakening that came with seeing the whole truth, the parts buried beneath shame, regret, and silence. I was forced to confront the fact that the truth, no matter how brutal, might be the only thing that could set me free. But freedom, I learned, has a price. In a moment I will never forget. As the dawn crept through the blinds and painted my room in cold light, I felt something shatter inside me, like the breaking of chains I didn't know I was wearing. I whispered, into the emptiness, a confession I had hidden even from myself, that I had been part of the story all along, not just a witness, but a participant. That my own memories were intertwined with Elijah's, with Franklin's, with the woman's gaze in the photograph. That I had danced with the darkness long before I ever realized it. The fear that had kept me captive began to unravel. But so did the fragile safety of ignorance. I knew in that raw, exposed moment that the story was no longer about finding a neat resolution. It was about living in the spaces between the questions and answers, embracing the unending mystery of what it means to be human, flawed, broken, searching, and painfully alive. The haunting would never fully leave me, nor would the shadows. But maybe, just maybe, facing that darkness was the only way to glimpse a kind of light. So here we stand, at the edge of understanding and oblivion, looking into a reflection that refuses to lie. The truth is no longer a secret hidden behind locked doors or silent witnesses. It's inside us, messy and complicated, demanding we see it, even when it hurts. And as you watch this, feeling the weight of what you've just witnessed, know, the story is far from over, because some awakenings are only the beginning. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.